Welcome to today's session. My name is Terence Mlovela, and I will be your lecturer for this module. And I believe that you have dealt already with Unit 1, as the recordings were already provided. So today we'll be dealing with Unit 2, which is on the role of PAM, being Public Administration and Management in a Democratic Dispensation. That is the name or the topic of Unit 2. Now, what I want us to look at is the learning outcomes that by the end of this unit, you should be able to show an understanding of the term governance and good governance within the public sector, and you should be able to understand the term public administration. So this concept are already provided for in the study guide. So again, you must be able to define governance in the context of the public sector, explain the role of section 196, one of the most important section that we'll be looking at. I need you to get that section in your phone, in your document, or if you have, for those that work in government, they already have the, the constitution. They can also refer there and see what is being stipulated in section 95. But if I was to share some of the principles and values governing public administration, the first one is, if I still remember well, it deals with a high standard of professional ethics that must be promoted and maintained. So what that means is that public administration must foster professionalism. In other words, it must be professionalized in a sense that we are being um, control, or we work within the parameters of ethics, because ethics brings order in public administration or in government departments or municipalities or any public institution that is being regulated by the government. Again, the second principle from there, section 196, it deals with public administration must be broadly representatives of the South African people. So what this means is that public administration was designed for the sake of developing, promoting, and including the public as a whole. That is why the term public. Remember, on the last unit or the first unit, I said that the word public or the term public also refers to the people or the citizenry. So it is their right, because government represent them and it must serve the people at the end of the day. And the third principle has to do with human resource management and career development practices must be cultivated. So to have effective public administration, what we need is that employees or public officials must be trained where it seems like they are lacking, particularly in the digital era, where we know that there are new machines, new softwares that must be introduced. So for people to be able to comprehend and adapt into the new environment, they must be taught and but it must be trained. There must be training. That is why government departments or municipalities are required to train and develop their own human resource, so that you can be sure of your workforce and be so confident that you do have a capable um, workforce at the end of the day. So those are some of the principles that you find in section 195. You need to go through them. You never know if as to name them or mention them and explain. Now, another point of the learning outcomes, you must be able to apply a framework of good governance. You must be able to define corruption, identify types of corruption within the public sector, identify the social and economic impact of corruption in the public sector, explain the role of institution and oversight committees in promoting transparency and accountability. So this is the key that we are looking at within this unit, that we must know the importance of fostering transparency and accountability, because the old traditional public administration had some cracks in its own tools or its own mechanisms used to foster transparency and accountability, because we used to have one national party, and we know that because of old traditional public administration, a lot of things were not taken seriously, or maybe the issue of transparency and accountability was not seen as something that was a legal right for the public. So today we are so fortunate that we have the parliament as one of the public accountability mechanism that is used to account back to the people. You get to know what is happening in government. You get to know what is the budget, or how is the government planning to budget for the government departments, and how finances are to be utilized. Although corruption exists, but at least we have a picture that their role is to account back to the people. So those were just some of the learning outcomes that you must understand. So one thing I want you to know or to note, at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that we understand Unit 2. So the purpose of Unit 2 is to explore the role of public administration and management, like I said, in a democratic dispensation. So when we say the democratic dispensation, we're talking about the kind of government that was adopted or uh, declared in 1994, when we said we are now ushering into a democratic government that allows people to vote, that allows political parties to be formed and the public to be involved in all government affairs. I mean, in terms of Section 152 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, it does state that people must, the local government as well, must be promoting and fostering or encouraging community engagement in its own municipal affairs. So those are some of the benefits that you see in a democratic dispensation. So when referring to PAM, we're focusing on the role of practitioners. So what we mean there is that government has different public management, so their roles are different, and they play a very serious role in terms of democratic dispensation to be realized, and that contribute to the discipline of public management as well as public administration. So very, very important. So there are concepts within this unit that you must be familiar with, like your administrative reform. So here, when we talk about reforms, maybe I can say a little something about reform so that we understand what reform is all about. So the goal here is that government have been launching major public reforms over the years. Traditional public services are under pressure to transform and seem to be evolving. But the question was, into what? So that question started within or around 1970s, where one could generally talk about public administration. So in the late 1980s came the new move that we refer to today as the new public management. Um, Again, and some to public administration and management. So when you see PAM, or when you see public administration and management, and you see new public management, it means the same thing, because to some we refer to it as new public management, but to some is public administration and management. So recently, some scholars have argued that there is a further shift from the new public management to governance, but that is something that we'll deal with in another session. So our goal here is to understand the concept or the new idea or the new concept known as NPM, New Public Management. So the reason why we have to understand together with governance, remember on your concepts, you will find the definition of a governance. Just include it here because I want you to read those on your study guide. So the role of PAM in political, constitutional, and administrative reforms. Why this? First of all, the old traditional public administration was not really allowing a lot to be done in terms of giving people more freedom or flexibility. There was lack of um, public participation in terms of government decisions. So that is a problem, because if decisions are made without the involvement of the people, then the people are forcefully controlled by the government. In other words, the government was controlling uh, how things should operate, and in fact, they were deciding what people need instead of allowing people telling them what do they need and how the government can improve. So today, because of the new public management, these are some of the elements that should be adopted to ensure successful public sector reform. So the new public management is actually what we call administrative reforms or the public sector reform. So what it does is that it comes to restructure government or reorganize government and reduce the size of government, and also allow the government to structure itself properly to provide services not only by government department but by allowing other service providers to be involved. That is why after 1994, you have seen a lot of um, service providers being in line or working with the government to at least improve the level or the quality of services that were being provided. In other words, the new public management comes as a um, handy, let me just say, a handy tool that helps government realize that it is not only the government that can provide services, but there are other service providers in the private sector that can help provide services and use various mechanisms that can help government use less resources, but also produce maximum results. So in the traditional public administration, the problem was that it was all about what the central government wanted. It was not necessarily about how things will be transformed. And there were no incentives that we see today, because we see that public managers, they also receive rewards. They are also evaluated. I mean, their performance is being evaluated. And then if it's up to the standard that was set, then they get reward. So that is one of the principle that the new public management brings about. So the public service there being the part of the reform is that public administration should be based on professional and high civil service and recruited and promoted according to merit trained. In other words, this one comes with ethics and public interest. And we want people that are effective, that will be able to respect the rule of law. In other words, instead of saying that people perform better because of instruction, what we're saying is that we must allow people to be flexible, to adapt, to understand the principle of value for money, not to waste resources by saying that the government is providing resources. No, by making sure that they do more with less. So in terms of management practices, remember these are the three elements that should be adopted to ensure public sector reforms. That is the new public management. So with management practices, I have a point that I want to make here so that we are on the same page. So if I was to make an example between this one so that we get the point across, what I will say is that the traditional public administration focuses on standards that are established, procedures that are established throughout the entire government, while the new public management uses the private sector management style to improve. Now, this means that in discipline of resource usage, what happens is that the new public management check resource demand and do more with less, while traditional public administration focuses on due process and political entitlement. It's not about the resource demanded and making sure that even though the resources are not enough, you still have the desire or the passion to do more with less. So those are some of the things that you must understand at the end of the day. So for us to understand is that you need to understand your history first. Where did we go wrong, or how did traditional public administration come about? Now, this is the structure that you see that in the country we used to have at least 4 administrators And first of them, or let me just say, one of them, we know them as the Cape Colony, Orange Free State, Natal, and Transvaal. These were if I was to explain it in uh, simple terms, it's more like there were the four provinces or provincial government or municipalities. I don't know how to put them out. Let me just use the four provinces or provincial government because it's more like they were in provinces. Because Cape Town, you automatically know that it was in the Western Cape, Orange Free State. We know that it was in the Free State, Natal, KwaZulu-Natal, Transvaal. So these were the ones that were catering for the white minority group, meaning that the African communities here were not catered for. And this was happening around that time, your 1910, 1912, until we had so much anger from various groups that um, were classified according to their tribe. So during this time, the apartheid government back then um, established a legislative framework called Group Areas Act of 1956, if not 58. So that Group Areas Act was used to isolate people or to segregate them and put them in various groups to say that this kind of people would live in this area. That is why even today, a lot of places do not have access to facilities, do not have access to acceptable school, hospitals. Is still a challenge because they were kept far away from things that um, really were their daily needs. So for African people to be in cities or towns, they needed to have a work permit or traveling permit or something to produce if you are found there. And you were given a specific time to arrive and a specific time to leave. So this meant that the apartheid government had an agenda not to involve the African people because the government of the day was that they decide what is to be done. And that is traditional public administration, but it was used in the wrong way because the apartheid regime really segregated the people that they were supposed to govern. So that is the problem. Now, when we look at the new constitution, it's more like it's breaking away from that tradition and it brings up or it breaks up traditional structures into what we call quasi-autonomous units. So that is the concept of the new public management because it brings about institutions that work with government or businesses that work with government, but they are not completely controlled by the government. That is why we have your state-owned agencies, whereby the government own a certain amount or a certain percentage, more like 51%, and then the private sector owns 49, if that's the case. So in most cases, that's what really improved the today's government. But still, that also opened a room for corruption. That is why one of your learning outcome there, it deals with corruption. You must understand corruption and define it within the public sector. So for us to have a more reason or effective administrative reforms, we look at global and national perspective. So this perspective, here it says that there are several generic positive outcomes. Those are the results when you implement administrative reforms. I won't go through them, but I will just mention two. Number one, you will have improved accountability and transparency in decision making. Remember, what I was saying is that one of the scholars called Herbert Simon of around 1980s challenged the traditional public administration to say that traditional public administration was just inconsistent proverbs of people that made them without conscious because they were not behaving in a sense that could actually improve their behavior and the way they conduct themselves. That is why he was saying that decision making must become the root for public administration. But he was later criticized by other scholars to say that if we allow Herbert Simon to say that, or to establish that it's going to destroy traditional public administration. So what we're saying is that the classical public administration continued to take over even after it was criticized, because even people in politics were beginning to say that what is the foundation of public administration? Because sometimes it borrows from the private sector. The next thing it borrows from politics. The next thing it borrows from psychology. The next thing is borrowing from all this. And that's what it is. That is why we say that public administration is an evolving discourse, because it is all about what is currently taking place within society. So if we are saying that now we're in the digital era, now we must adopt the digital era, either the artificial intelligence or the digital technologies. So those kind of innovation, they affect public administration, and we can use your blockchain, we can use your AI, we can use your e-government or e-governance system or mechanisms or innovations to improve accountability and transparency in decision making. That is why these days you can be connected, even though you are not physically attending a particular session or meeting or public lecture, through digital devices, because what we're trying to say is that you need to know what is happening in government, in parliament, and so forth. So the second one, it talks about increased decentralization of functions and the devolution of decision-making authority. So the new public management, or the administrative reforms through the new public management, is to make sure that nothing now that was centralized by the traditional public administration becomes the same. So now we come up with the concept of decentralization. So decentralization is the central government sharing or transferring some of its function to local and provincial government to make sure that it is not pressured by all the demands that citizens demand or make. So at least you can have your local government dealing with local people, provincial government dealing with provincial people, and the national government dealing with all national government matters. So that's why it is more important to take all. So these are five key elements of administrative reforms. I won't go through them, but you just have to study them on your own. There are five. That one that talks about shift control, I can actually say it summarizes the unit, because shift control from the top or the middle to give people, groups, or community the power to solve public problems. So this is what the new public management is all about, or the administrative reforms try to bring about within the public sector, to say that now we need to shift from the mentality of centralizing everything. You decentralize your powers, your functions to various units that are autonomous. That's why we refer to local municipalities as autonomous units or autonomous government that is capable of producing or establishing its own bylaws within area of jurisdiction to control and govern itself, governing itself, but also it must do so in line with the constitution. That is why the objects of local government are found in section 152 of the Constitution of South Africa. That is to make sure that the local government do not get out of hand by establishing something that is beyond the constitution, or it does not contravene with the settings of the constitution. So we're changing the culture there of the public institution, changing habits, changing the way people think, the way people are being treated. Because remember, in the traditional public administration, remember one of the concepts was to say there must be impersonal relationship between supervisors and employees, meaning that you and your supervisor were not allowed to have a close relationship to better improve your functioning or your functions or your roles or your task. So you're working because you were instructed. But in the new era, through administrative reforms, you have to coordinate with other offices or other employees to improve your work. Now we do have public administration and management in a democratic dispensation. For it to be understood better, you must look at it at various viewpoints: government legitimacy, socio-political stability, democratizing service delivery. So these are the three viewpoints that you can help you understand the unit. These are clearly defined in the in the study guide, you just need to go through them and understand what are the viewpoints of understanding the unit. So the role and conduct of public officials. So this is the key of the unit, because what we want is that the role of public official begins to change from traditional way of doing things, because there are people that still want to do things by controlling or by saying that they want to continue with the bureaucratic uh, system whereby everything takes forever to achieve, because of processes that takes office from other office and another office. And this is because you find that particular offices are not given the authority to approve things. So that is why when you want something to be approved, it will go back to the central government for it to be approved. So what the administrative reform are trying to do is that if something is a need in a local municipality or local office, give that local office the authority to approve its plans, although they must perform or they must structure their plans according to the national or central government, so that they don't just do something that is out of order. So, but also give them that authority or little authority to do some things without always coming to the headquarters because of undisturbed control and supervision. So that is a problem. That is why we don't want control from the headquarters through the hierarchy of unbroken supervision and balance checks. So what we're saying there is that public administration is a problem, because what we want is hands-on professional management with clear statement of goals and performance measurement. That is something that a local office should be able to do, but the main instruction can still come from the central government, but still you must allow your local institution and offices to be able to have hands-on professional management with clear statement of goals and so forth. So these are some of the, what can I say? Some of the mechanisms that can be applied to improve the roles of public official. Number one, encourage frequent contact between people of different backgrounds, so that people can better understand each other. So this means is that local offices must be able to encourage community engagement or customer engagement, because at the end of the day, it is them that get the services or demand services from these governmental offices. So these are some of the mechanisms that you must understand, but there are roles and responsibilities of public officials, of which you must understand, read, and be able to explain them as provided. I won't go through them because they're already provided. So in conclusion, I want to make a very, very simple conclusion. What I can say is that public administration and management, it comes as a reform or administrative reform. Number one, to deal with government organizations, meaning that it comes to break up traditional structures into autonomous units, and it comes to bring about hands-on professional management with clear statement of goals and performance management. Again, it comes to deal with control of output measures, whereby it stresses results and output control rather than procedures. And again, it comes to bring about management practices by using the private sector management styles. And it also brings discipline in the usage of government resources, meaning that it checks resources demand and seeks to do more with less. So that is what the administrative reforms are all about. So if we have any other question, what I will say is that we must have a discussion whereby we must understand that new public management is a vision, is an ideology, or a bundle of particular management approaches and techniques that started in the 1980s to drive about change. So what happens is that in South Africa or African governments, around 1980s, there was a problem of governance, because most of government or most of um, or the majority of African countries were beginning to become independent, meaning that they were getting rid of apartheid regime. Although in South Africa it happened around 1994, but most countries in Africa by the late 1980s already they were free from the apartheid regime. So the problem was that how do we adapt and how do we govern ourselves, or how do we regulate some things in government, because now the colonizers have left their countries, they flee the countries. Now they've left the government into their hands. So the United Nations began to realize that they need to document or produce a new way of helping African governments to actually govern themselves. So that is why the new public management became a very, very serious concept within those times. And there's a lot that you can read and understand around this topic, but it needs or requires someone that is actually interested in reading, because your study guide have information that needs more time and need extra understanding. So because of the new administrative reforms, there is greater emphasis on output controls, meaning that resource allocation and rewards are linked to performance. In other words, you get resources from the government because of your performance, not just because you need them. It also stresses the need, or it needs to stress results rather than procedures. Unlike traditional public administration, the new public management stresses results rather than the procedures that are being designed by the central government. So that is what it's all about. In other words, it shifts to greater competition in the public sector, meaning that you move to term contracts and public tendering procedures, introduction of market discipline in the public sector. What that means is that there is competition or rivalry via competition as the key to lower cost and better standard, meaning that there is bidding or there are tenders that are being issued, but you have to compare which service provider can provide services better and which one is less costly, but also effective in its provision of services. So it also stresses on private sector styles of management practice, meaning that you move away from traditional public service ethics to a more flexible play, hiring, rules, and so forth. So what we say is that there must be, you need to apply proven private sector management tools in the public sector so that at the end of the day, you have the best of the best. So